All right, folks, so we have a lunar eclipse in Scorpio in 2 days' time, in a little over 48 hours' time. And for us here on the west coast of the United States, it's at 9:13 p.m. Pacific time. So for many people, it'll be on Monday. You can figure out what that's going to mean for you. As you've heard me say before, it is a full moon lunar eclipse, so the week before and after March the 15th is also important and relevant to where things are at tomorrow. And depending on who you are and how you feel and how things are working out for you, it could be that the March 15th date is somehow more important than tomorrow's date. But it's not like you're not going to be feeling the building intensity of this full moon lunar eclipse. Okay, it's like a mounting pressure, and it's a mounting pressure that for a lot of us has to do with things dealing with the past or past issues, and I'll expand on that in a second. And you could look at that March 15th date the week before, week after. When you use a diffuser, whether it is a cologne or a perfume or a spray of some sort of diffuser, when you press the diffuser at the tip of the nozzle, the spray is at its most condensed and then it spreads out. So you can look at that March 15th date in some ways as sort of a focal point that then continues to diffuse the energy, and the energy continues to build and spread through the May 15th date. Now, we continue to have eclipses. I'll tell you when the next Scorpio eclipses are in a second. Actually, for some reason, I'm feeling like I should do that, even though I wasn't intending to do that. We have a lunar eclipse on May the 15th, and then we have a solar eclipse in Scorpio on October 25th of this year. October 25th of this year, with a corresponding lunar eclipse on May the 5th of 2023. So you can look at, we had a lunar eclipse in Taurus on November the 19th, 2021. And as I said to you, and as I've been saying on this video, that September 19, 2021 to November 19, 2021 was the emergence of a new set of energies. And because we were talking about the Taurus eclipses, which are the North Node eclipses, which are the eclipses in the part of the chart that we're meant to lean into, that we're meant to develop, that we're meant to grow, that we're meant to pour ourselves into, where we are meant to feel a sense of calling currently and development, it could be that for many of us, those energies were fresh and exciting and interesting and required positive attention. A lot depends on where the sign of Taurus falls in your chart, what house it occupies and what that house stands for. So, and then as I mentioned to you when we had the eclipse, solar eclipse in Taurus 2 weeks ago on April the 30th, we have a 6-month cycle from April the 30th to November the 8th of this year, as a 6-month full eclipse cycle in Taurus. And so whatever energies, and I'm talking about energies that were developing then, that were brought up then, now have a chance to continue to develop and bear fruit. And as I mentioned in my last 2 or 3 videos, and I would look at those last 2 videos if you haven't yet, whenever you get a chance, the April 30th solar eclipse, the June 30th date becomes really important because the April 30th solar eclipse happened and we ran right into the Mercury retrograde on May the 10th, and we have run right into the lunar eclipse where there's been another set of energies building since March the 15th in 2 days' time. So whatever that April 30th energy is that is growing has to clear certain hurdles before it can really start to blossom and take root and flower. So I would imagine that after Mercury goes direct on June the 2nd, and we I would imagine as we head to the middle of June and towards the end of June, that's when we'll really start to, after we're done with the Venus transit in Taurus, and I'll follow along with this in future videos that I do, that's when we'll see the April 30th eclipse really kind of start to show itself a lot more clearly and with much greater clarity with regard to how it's going to move ahead, as a picking up of energies between September 19th and November 19th of last year. Well, similarly, we have a lunar eclipse in Scorpio this time, not in Taurus, on May the 15th. And the Scorpio eclipses are the South Node eclipses, where something needs to be released. an attachment to something, a set of behaviors that we might subconsciously inhabit very easily, or exhibit very easily, or reach to or lean into very easily, but that have served their purpose. Or something material in the part of the chart where Scorpio sits, what house it occupies and what that house stands for. So whatever that release is has been growing since March the 15th. And if this isn't enough for you, as I mentioned, we have a full 6-month cycle of the eclipses with these kind of energies. I'm sorry. From October the 25th of this year, later this year, to May the 5th of next year. And then in 2024, we're done. Those are the 2 Scorpio. So we still have, those are the 2 remaining Scorpio eclipses that we've got. Eclipses of release are harder than eclipses of leaning into. And this particular eclipse is fascinating insofar as, on its way to becoming full, the moon trines Mars and Neptune in Pisces, and it squares Saturn in Aquarius. Now, it's an eclipse of release in Taurus, a sign that the moon is never completely comfortable in, and archetypally brings up all sorts of visibility and issues and undertow and drama related to relationships, related to relating, related to financial enmeshments and expectations and romantic, the messiness of intense, it doesn't even have to be real sometimes. It's about the promises we make to each other, but it's about how we connect with each other, whether it is an intensely personal relationship, and the financial and the emotional intimacies and power dynamics and power struggles that are part of those, or whether even in more distant relationships, there could be business relationships, there could be where it's not a shrug of the shoulder type of relationship, there's an emotional undertow to it. So if that archetypally rings true, and the moon is notoriously not content in Scorpio, because it's our emotional intuitive system, and the moon likes steadiness, and the moon likes placidity, and the moon likes abundance, and the sign of Scorpio is about truth, about power in relationships. And the moon, our emotional system, is naturally disturbed in this part of the zodiac. So if that rings true for you in some ways, then there it is. There's the archetype. It is even more pronounced and more important in the part of the chart that it happens for you. So depending on what your rising sign is, you'll know where Scorpio sits in your chart, what house it occupies, and what that house stands for if you're an astrology person. And that will give you even more clues about what this is about, starting March the 15th to May the 15th of this year, and then picking up again, as I said, October 25th into May of next year. The primary transit that is happening right after this full moon, that this full moon encodes, is Mars conjuncting Neptune in Pisces on May the 19th. Now, Mars is a planet of action, the pursuit of goals, and the setting up of boundaries, and so it can also be conflict. Mars is the testosterone, the male planet, as I've said before many times on this channel. So when you harness the male side of yourself, the Mars side of yourself, and Mars is also the ruler of this full moon, one of the 2 rulers of this full moon, because Mars rules Scorpio. It's not the Libra archetype of relationships, which is ruled by Venus, which likes peace and harmony and handshakes. It is the Scorpio side of things, who has control over what, and who has power over what, and what is really underneath the surface, and how do dark sides and shadow sides and light sides interact, and how are we triggered, and how do we connect, and how do we find each other irresistible, and how do we find each other maddening, all that kind of stuff. As I said, it can be close relationships and intense relationships, and it doesn't have to. It just has that. It's just any relationship that has that scorpionic undertow to it. It's not a casual relationship that you don't care about. It's not relationships that you're not emotionally invested in. You are emotionally invested in these relationships, even if they're casual, even if they're business. Possibly because there could be a financial connection too. Okay? So Mars, the male planet of action and desire and conflict, it has to be said, the testosterone planet, the red planet, the planet that draws blood, the planet of conflict, the planet of attaining goals, conjuncts Neptune 4 days from now, the planet of the planet of detaching from the material, bliss, contentment. Contentment in terms of connection to spirit, renunciation, really kind of blissful states that ignore material reality. And so things like music and drugs and alcohol and the arts and inspiration, I'm including both the positive and the challenging aspects of this, and intense sensual connections. I'll use the sensual word as opposed to another word that will get my video reviewed on YouTube, where we feel a kind of a, Neptune has a kind of a rose-colored intensity to it, where things feel like they have a lot of meaning, and they might, because with Neptune our intuitive soul systems are involved as opposed to our mental systems. Neptune also, as we've discussed on this channel before, governs things like loss and deception and gaslighting, fogginess, because ultimately Neptune is leading us to disentangle and loosen our threads and our attachment to the material. And so sometimes that happens through loss, through a recognition and a teaching that the things that we're attached to are not ours. Nobody and nothing is ours. You come in a certain way and you're going to leave a certain way. So Neptune in that regard is very much an anti-ego planet, which is challenging, because we get attached to things and get attached to people. So when Mars conjuncts Neptune, those of you who are involved in something intensely spiritual or renunciatory or isolated or meditation or a retreat or dealing with any kind of isolation, if you're renouncing things and going the Mother Teresa path, if you are entering a monastery, if you are dealing with the arts and inspiration, particularly if it has a fantasist or a music element, all of that is favored insofar as action and energy can go in that direction. With Mars conjuncting Neptune on the darker side, the one thing I will say is be careful over the next 4 or 5 days when you are operating heavy machinery, cars, vehicles, motorcycles. Mars conjunct Neptune, sometimes injuries and even mortality, fatalities can happen that have a kind of a mystery to them, but they often involve I know that someone's going to argue with me and say, well, it's Mercury that is about conveyance. And I'm not talking about commuting as much as I'm talking about speed and rashness and maleness running into, this depends on where this conjunction is happening. So nothing wrong with being a little careful. And if you're operating anything that can do an injury or performing tasks that can be injurious, very important, be truly present so that you don't go into a Neptunian daydream or get lost in something while you're operating something that can hurt you or do some serious injury or serious damage. We're still in eclipsy times, okay? So things like sudden events or issues related to mortality are especially pronounced, I find, around eclipse times. Another 2 weeks, folks, and then, the energy will start to lighten up. Now, with Mars conjunct Neptune also, remember that in the sign of Pisces, as I've said, it has been active since 2014, 15, 16, especially 15, 16, and will continue to remain active into 2025, 2026. But with Mars conjunct Neptune, if there's anything to do with deception or gaslighting that started to really show itself or make itself somehow pronounced even in February, March, but that March 15th date, this is where it becomes relevant or interesting. It could be that it brings up a kind of a do or die moment, a kind of a battle moment, a kind of a setting of boundaries moment over the next 3 or 4 days. It could very well be that some sort of action is taken either by some party or yourself to do a certain amount of deception or thievery or something underhanded or something behind the curtains, something cloudy. It's not a straightforward energy, or else you may find that you are setting boundaries and defending yourself from and fighting off that kind of energy from someone else. So look to things like even benign theft or identity theft or those kinds of things. Okay. So I know we've covered this kind of gaslighting topic a lot, but if that resonates for you, that around March the 15th, something resurrected itself and kind of brought up old issues, or the Pisces side of the chart that has seen so much activity since 2015, 2016, for some people with a sense of loss around it or deception around it, then we're coming up to, for this year especially, for the past 2 or 3 months, a kind of a peaking point. And this especially holds true for me with that March 15th timeline, where you might find that you need to draw a line in the sand or pull out the proverbial Mars bow and arrow. Please do not be, I am not advocating any kind of weaponry or violence, okay? If you need to get help legally or something along something, you know, those are the, I'm going to let you determine what it is that needs to be done to defend oneself in a non-damaging or violent manner. So let me just, you know, sometimes you have to be careful what you say because you don't know what people will take away from it. So irrespective, drawing a line in the sand, you may feel compelled to do that over the next 4 weeks, or either you or someone else you might find is gonna be sneaking into the cookie jar and be trying to get away with something and not being transparent about it, okay? And you may feel that as you head to this eclipse, because we're 4 days away and it's encoding that. Plus, as I said, this eclipse of release trines, it's a supportive aspect to Mars conjunct Neptune in Pisces. So with this eclipse, something might bubble up intuitively, or you might notice something, or you might feel something where you feel like, I need to take some sort of action to defend myself against some sort of gaslighty, smoke and mirrors behavior that could affect what I value. Remember that between December 28th and May the 10th, we had Jupiter in this part of the chart creating a new 12-year cycle, creating a renewal here. And just a few weeks ago, we had Venus conjuncting Neptune. So there may be something that needs to be defended. There may be a pot of gold of some kind. And this is where this kind of Scorpio full moon theme, I know that the Mars-Neptune conjunction is happening in Pisces, but this idea of financial relationship entanglements, you know, there's a kind of a harmony of theme here. There could be kind of some sort of a pot of gold that has made itself available, etc., that someone could be trying to get away with. You know, there's someone I follow on YouTube who uses the phrase low-hanging fruit often, and it can have that kind of someone trying to get or expand something, but not being transparent about it, not being clear about it, not being, hey, this is what I'd like to do, this is how I feel about it, can we talk about it, I know we might disagree. You know, it's not noble, it's not direct. It may not have integrity. Okay, now this lunar eclipse also squares Saturn in Aquarius, our old friend Saturn in Aquarius. Boundaries, patterns, learning lessons about self-defeating behaviors and patterns, where Aquarius is in your chart, and where Saturn has been transiting since the end of 2020 and will be till March 2023. And in 2021, remember, Saturn square Aquarius was the big transit. And I have done videos on Saturn and Aquarius before, so again, I don't feel compelled to dwell on it, except to say that we have often talked about how the emergence of the new is also happening hand in hand with tying up loose ends around energy leaks from the past. And it could be that all of this is related somehow, where Scorpio sits in your chart and where Aquarius sits in your chart and where Pisces sits in your chart. And the fact that something could be, the fact that you may feel like you need to say something. And Mercury is retrograde, so could be addressing or clearing things or trying to relook at things from the past to try and gain some clarity. One thing about Mercury retrograde, because it's happened, you know, we had the April 30th solar eclipse and we ran into it on May the 10th. You know, we're just coming out of what I will call the dust up. With Mercury going retrograde, it's a dust up. It's like we're moving February, March, April, we were going in a certain direction. Then all of a sudden around May the 10th, we were just like, oh, whoa. We need to relook at certain things. We need to look at this again. We need to, have we factored everything in? And be careful, because you will not be able to dot the I and cross the T on this till about June the 5th to 6th. So be careful about what you commit to and promise. Not the best time, if you can help it, to sign on or to finalize anything between now and June the 6th. But you may feel compelled to, wherever you need to release something in Scorpio, wherever you need to draw the line or pursue artistic goals or creative goals, or look for healing when it comes to any sort of addiction. We're talking about Mars conjuncting Neptune and Pisces, trining the Scorpio full moon, and the full moon squaring Saturn. So important to really pay attention to what the Scorpio full moon is bringing up, so that there may be a link towards lessons that you are required to learn and behaviors that you are required to employ that are new and go against self-defeating behaviors and patterns from the past that don't allow you to fulfill your potential. So it could be that you're called upon to act differently to address some sort of cycle that has been in place since 2014, 15, 16. But the release is happening in the Scorpio part of your chart. Not easy. Headaches, blood pressure, blood flowing, nosebleeds, injuries, bleeding, sensuality. You know, it's like it's a full moon, and it's a full moon eclipse. So it's going to have that kind of pressure cooker feeling. And lots of emotional, intuitive, entangled sorrow, regret, guilt, love, evaluation, power, reflection going on. Now, I like to keep it at the 20-minute mark. So, ruled by Mars, ruled by Pluto, Pluto in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn rules Aquarius, but also ruled by Uranus in Taurus, ruled by Venus, Venus is in Aries, back to Mars. And I'm going to explain what I'm saying here in a second. And in Scorpio, also Mars in Pisces. So the dispositors of the chart are Jupiter and Neptune, are Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces, Jupiter in Aries, Saturn in Aquarius. Fascinating. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I'm not going to dwell. Guys, you know what? Whatever you need to do with this release, you really need to do so that you can avail of the opportunities that the solar eclipse in Taurus is trying to bring over the next 6 months, starting April 30th. Okay? And so there's a pressure cooker building right now during the month of May and into early June. It's a couple of different things. You know, there's the Mercury retrograde, but there's also this eclipse, and Mars conjunct Neptune in Pisces, and the eclipse squaring Saturn. If over the next 3 or 4 or 5 days you find that you have to really clear the slate in some way to make room for newer energies, then consider it. Remember to remain grounded. And sometimes eclipses can lead us to make rash decisions. So be very conscious and very careful and take responsibility. If you're going to do something rash and rebellious, because the solar eclipse was conjunct Uranus about a week ago, take full accountability for what that might bring. Because the nodes are involved, you're going to clear the slate. You're going to have to. You're going to have to. But sometimes people would say with eclipses, it's better to reflect rather than act. And I think that, some of us are going to be acting and some of us are going to be reflecting, but we are going to be reaching a point of no return or coming to head with something over the next 3 or 4 days or 2 days where we really realize that there's a set of energy leaks that need to be released so that we can avail of what is coming up. And there is a mystery to all of this. There's a mystery to all of this with the eclipses. You might think you know what is coming up, but you don't. More to follow, okay? Like, share, subscribe, click the bell icon next to the YouTube subscribe button on YouTube so you're notified whenever I do new videos. I will expand on these kind of sort of mystery themes and some of the themes I brought up. I just hate going over the 20-25 minute mark, so I'm going to leave it at this for now. Try to remain as cool as possible over the next few days so that even if you're going to take action, you are clear. If you're going to be Scorpionic, I'd much rather you are groundedly, more quietly Scorpionic about things, so that if you're going to be putting an end to something, you are clear about how to do it in a way that actually is of benefit to you. But if you feel like you need to in order to clear the energetic slate, consider it. Just be careful of sort of lightning bolt eclipsey actions, and if you do take that, be aware that you might have to deal with the consequences of that as well. Okay? Talk to you soon.